So Chad, we have a question in the Q&A. Did you want to enable that or bring that forward?
Yes, I can read that for you. Absolutely. We have a couple of questions lined up. One is, could you talk more about how you were funded for the project and how you chose to spend that funding on your reporting?
So we don't have, you know, we're very fortunate in that we don't have to kind of submit budget proposals as we go for projects. You know, I mean, BuzzFeed is very supportive, and you know, went to our editor and we were like, we'd like to do this project, but it might cost some money, and they were like, just go for it. And obviously we had one eye on it. You know, you don't ignore these things, but we didn't kind of sit down and kind of formally plan it out as such. And sometimes it's really difficult to do as well, because you don't know where the reporting's gonna take you, you know, and that means that you can incur costs that you didn't anticipate or expect. But our unit at BuzzFeed, our investigations team, is geared towards doing kind of complex, ambitious public interest reporting, and they give us a lot of support to do that, you know, and almost every project I've been there, I've felt that. I think that's,
yeah. I just wanted to say, I'm so grateful. There are very few places, especially these days, that would have let two reporters spend a year. You know, we traveled to, I think, 5 different countries collectively by the end of it. It took a lot of time, and it's expensive just logistically discussing Cameroon, you know, to support that type of project and keep the reporter safe and do it ethically and do it right and get the goods. And I am really grateful that BuzzFeed is a place that saw the value of this story and allowed us to use these resources to complete it.
I mean, a related question from the audience on that. Someone is wondering, how did you persuade your editors that it was going to be worth it, that this was going to pan out, that an issue that had been around forever and nobody could prove it, you were going to be able to do it? And did they know it was going to take you a year?
Yeah. Sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
No, after you, Kate, you go.
I was just going to say, with this story, I think almost a problem in the beginning. After a few months of research, we had so many leads that it was time to start traveling. And I think that we were lucky in that we knew that once we got out there, we would be able to get what we needed. You know, for example, we knew about the court documents before I went to Nepal. We had the complaints from Cameroon before we went there to do the in-person interviews. So by the time the majority of the money that and time was spent on the international travel, but we took the time to source up and get the documents beforehand. And then once we had them, we were able to go to our editors and say, we have these records, we have these documents, now we have to go do the interviews. And by that time, they could see the value in the project because we had that. I don't know if you agree, Tom.
I totally agree. And I mean, in the early phase of the project before Kate joined, there were times where we have a brilliant editor, Alex Campbell, and I'd say to him, like, Alex, I don't know if we can pull this off. And he was like, no, you just have to keep going, keep knocking on doors. And the amazing thing about BuzzFeed is that they actively commission wild goose chases. So I've gone to them with stories before and they've been like, nah,
that's the quote of the panel, everybody. BuzzFeed, they actively commission wild goose chases.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. You know, I can remember when I started there, a British journalist, and I'd be like, look, this is a big issue in the UK. And they'd be like, have people written about it? And they're like, yeah, but we can do more. And they're like, no, I don't want that. They're like, we want something completely blank canvas. And that's really liberating, you know, and, you know, to the point where when I was training and everywhere else that I've worked, you always get told, pitch a story, not an issue. You know, come with, here's the story, not the issue. Whereas at BuzzFeed, you can go, here's the issue. And these are the likely stories. Can we go and do it? And they'll go, yeah, go and have a crack. And that's a great thing for a reporter, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of going back to, you know, the guys who told you, well, why aren't you reporting about what Trump is doing? Can you talk a little bit about you also did a story about the millions of dollars that the US government invests in some of these efforts, you know, these anti-poaching efforts through the Fish and Wildlife Service, I guess. Can you talk about the level of funding and knowledge and involvement of the US authorities? And I guess that there were some investigations on the US side done and some funding suspensions.
Yeah, I think that we had a really hard time. We filed FOIAs and we didn't get anything back, and we tried to source up and we couldn't get the information. And when we published our first series of stories, we did not know that much about the US funding. That was not something that was part of that first series. But then after that, there was a bipartisan congressional investigation launched into the issue, and then all of a sudden we started getting leaked documents and tips. And once it was brought more to the attention of interested parties, we stayed on the story. And I think this really shows the value of staying on a story, because 6 months later, we published stories more about the US. We were able to obtain further reports showing just that the highest up people at WWF knew about this. And we were also able to obtain information about the funding that showed that USAID and USDOI money from the Interior Department was going to law enforcement, anti-poaching issues at the parks where they had major problems with human rights abuses. And, I think it's very complex because, you don't want to stop funding for these very important projects. But I do think that if the US or any other country is giving money to parks abroad, they should, the people asking for that money should be able to say, these are the steps we are taking to make sure that this is done fairly to the indigenous people, that we're getting their consent to start these projects, that we're making sure that they're not being abused. That seems like something that should be necessary. And I think what WWF and other groups have said in the past was there's no way to guarantee that. Like, this is just collateral damage. This is something that's going to happen if we work in these really difficult areas. From my perspective, I think that's not enough. I think they have to do better. And thanks to our reporting and the investigations, the subsequent investigations, now they will have, if anyone wants money from whether WWF or other groups, they will have to be much clearer about what they'll do to prevent this. And I consider that a success.